Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Computer Science and Engineering Workshop. This is your host, Tic Ottoman speaking, and in today's video we're going to be doing a C exercise. We're going to be implementing a game called Tic Tac Toe. So if you're familiar with this game, you've probably seen this exercise as a Python exercise, but you see, when I was actually learning Python for the first time, I actually did this one as one of my exercises, and then I wanted to challenge myself and see if I could do the same thing in C programming language, because at the time C was my primary programming language, the primary programming language that I used at the time. It's still the primary programming language that I use today, but actually, to be honest, I spend more time working with Python, but anyway, that's besides the point now. So let's say that, let me just explain you the game first. So we have a board, a game board here with 9 cells here. So when we want to play our turn, what we want to do is we want to type in the index of the cell that we wish to populate. So in our case, we want to populate this one, so we type in 1. So now let's say that we want to populate the this cell number 2. And then let's say that we want to populate the 5th cell here, so we're just going to type in 5th. So now that now you see what can happen now is that if the player X gets to populate the cell, the player X is going to win, because, well, what's going to happen is that there will be 3 X's in one of the diagonal axes. So to prevent this, the player O will most definitely need to, populate the cell 9. And then this is pretty much it. So one thing I actually added was this sentinel value of -999 to be able to exit the program. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. Okay, so to start the project, the first thing that you will want to do, at least the first thing that I would prefer to do, is to go into Visual Studio and then create a new project. We're going to create an empty project here. I'm just going to name it Tic Tac Toe. It should pop up on my desktop. There it is. So we're just going to add a main.c file here. So let me just include the necessary libraries, standard input outputs, and then include std boolean. Okay, so I'm just gonna create my int main function, load this, and before we do anything else, what I actually recommend you to do before you start any project is to outline the functions that you're going to be needing. So for this project, we're going to be needing a total of 5 functions. So the first one is going to be to display the table here. It's going to be taking an array of characters, which will be called board. The board is going to be a one-dimensional array of 9 characters, which is basically a string, but let's continue. Next, we're gonna have an insert function. So what this one is gonna do is that it's basically gonna take whoever's turn it is, and then make them use their turn. So say for an example, let's say that the player X wants to play his or her turn, right? So what's gonna happen is that this function will take their turn as an X or an O, and then what it's going to do is it's just going to, as the name suggests, insert it into the board. So we're just going to have the board as a parameter as well here, and then let's continue. So the next one is as a function that is to check if anyone has won yet. So this one is actually going to return either true or false. So it's going to be a Boolean type function. So let's just say, call it check win. It's gonna take the board in as its only parameter. parameter. Frankly, that's just the only one it's gonna be needing. And lastly, we're just gonna have no, not lastly, my bad. The second last one is gonna be a function to check if a draw has occurred. So this is gonna be simple as well. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna actually, no, this doesn't take the that one. Okay, so what's gonna happen is that basically if 9 turns have been played, it's just gonna return true, indicating that there has been a draw. If, however, the turn count is less than 9, it will return false, and then the game will keep going on. And lastly, the function that we're gonna need is gonna be called switch turn function. It's basically gonna take the turn variable we're gonna have within our main function. So in that turn variable, we're gonna be storing either an X or an O to indicate whose turn it is. So what's this gonna do is that it's gonna take the turn in, and then if it's an X, it's gonna assign O, and if it's an O, it's gonna assign an X. So anyway, so let's just create our board here to be able to actually test the first function we're going to be writing, except we can't test it just yet because we haven't written it yet, but I digress. So inside of this array, I want to have a total of 9 hyphens, and I have a pretty good reason for that. So basically what's going to happen is that basically these hyphens in these cells of our board is going to indicate that cell is empty. It's going to come useful later. So let's just start with writing our first function. Right? So here inside of this function, what I'm going to have is I'm going to have a counter value of I for I equals 0, I less than 9 because we have 9 cells on the table. And lastly, I minus equals minus 1. There we go. So for every I, we're going to be printing the character stored inside that index of the board. So and after this, I'm just going to add a space to space the cells apart of it. So anyway, so we're just going to say board I here. So now this should print our table board, but what's going to happen is that it's just going to be printing it out. Actually, let me just demonstrate it real quick. So print, that's print display table. Just want to have the board here real quick. Expected goes in case and it blows. So just want to say exit 0. So what's going to happen here is that it's going to print it out as a single line and not as a collection of 3 rows and 3 columns. So to fix that, what we want to do is that we want to create a conditional statement here that that basically means that if we have printed 3 characters so far, actually no wait, that's my bad. So if the amount of characters that we have printed is perfectly divisible by 3, we're going to be printing out a new line. So say for example, if we printed 3 characters, we're going to be printing out a new line. If we printed out 6 characters, we're going to be printing out a new line as well. So inside of this, I'm just going to say I plus 1 because you see by the time we print 3 characters here, what's going to happen is that this I value will be equal to 2, which is not perfectly divisible by 3. So we're just going to add that plus 1 here. We're going to say mod 3. If this equals to 0, what we want to happen is we want to print out a new line. My bad there. Dang. Okay, so now let's just rerun this real quick. There we go. As you can see now, it prints them out as 3 rows and 3 columns. Okay, so now that we're done with the display table function, we're going to be writing the insert function. So the insert function is going to be prompting the user to enter the index of the cell that they wish to populate, except what's going to happen is that in game we're going to be starting our indexing from 1. So the cell with the index of 0 here is going to be 1 in the game. So actually, when we in the later parts of the function, what we want to do is we want to say board index minus 1 equals 10. There we go. So let's just prompt the user to enter the index now. Enter cell index. Let's make it a bit clearer. And then below this, we're going to be saying scanf underscore sd. Let's say for right of scanf percentage d versus index, and then yeah, this should do the job. So I'm just going to say let's test it now. We're going to say insert. Let's say that is the turn of I don't know, C. For example, in game we're not going to be encountering that obviously, but for the sake of the example, I'm just going to do that. And then below this, I just want to display the table once more to see what it looks like. Let's test it. Enter cell index. Let's enter it in the first one. As you can see, it works. Okay, so now that we're done with the insert function, we're just going to be working on the check win function. So let me just summarize the win conditions real quick. There again. So let's assume that the player X has all of his symbols across this first row here. It's basically going to be one of our win conditions, but let's just assume for a second that player O got her symbols on the first column here before player X got to place his. What's going to happen is that player O will be able to take that round, but let's just assume that none of the players wanted to go vertical or horizontal, and one of the players just decided to meet the win condition diagonally on one of the axes. So to implement this, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be checking their indexes one by one. So for row 1, what we want to do is we want to compare the cell 0 with cell 1. And if they match, we're going to be checking to see if cell 0 matches cell 2. So let me just type this, but there's a bit of a problem here. You see, by default, all of these cells are basically the same thing, and we can't just simply fill these cells at random. I mean, I guess we could, but no, it wouldn't be the best course of action. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be checking if the first cell of that win condition, so we're going to have a total of 8 win conditions, one for each 3 rows, and then one for each 3 columns, and then 2 for each diagonal axis. So first, what we're going to do, we're just going to simply say board if board 0 does not equal to hyphen, and then we're just gonna cut this, paste this here. So I'm just gonna copy paste this real quick to see if our function, if this bit of our function works. So we're just gonna print success here to check if our logic stands here. And then let's just have it return false because we don't want it to throw an error because it's you know what, it's fine. Okay, so let's just, I don't know, call it C. So we're just gonna say X here. I'm just gonna say I'm just gonna comment these real quick. So the next thing that we're gonna be doing is we're just gonna be calling the check row function below this. And then we're just going to send C inside as a parameter to see if we're going to be successful. And as you can see, we are indeed successful for the first one. So I'm just going to delete these real quick. Okay, so inside of this check function, we want to have a Boolean variable called win, which will be set to false by default. What's going to happen here is that if any of the 8 win conditions are met, this fin value is going to be assigned to true, and then our function will simply just return this win value in the event that any of these conditions are met. Now, let me just check my notes real quick. let's see. Okay, so we have a total of 7 more win conditions. So I'm just gonna call this one row 1. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna be copy pasting these. So it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Not 9, 8. There we go. So that's row 2. This is row 3. This is called 1. This is called 2. This is called 3. This is gonna be the axis 1, the one that goes left, right, and then it's gonna be the axis to the other diagonal axis. So let me just show you the indices of each win condition. So for the row 1, we're just going to simply be checking 0, 1, and 2. For row 2, we're just going to be checking to see if 3, 4, and 5 match, which is going to be very simple. We're just going to do it like this. And then lastly, for row 3, we're going to be comparing 6, 7, and 8. And we're simply just going to be done with it. So we're just going to say have 6 and 7 here, and then here's 6 and 8. There we go. So for column 1, we're going to start with checking the cell 0, and then we're going to compare cell 3 with the one that's right below it. And then lastly, we're going to be comparing 0 with cell 6. For the column number 2, we're going to be checking to see if number 1 is the cell 1 is empty. If it is not empty, we're going to be comparing it to cell 4, and then we're going to be comparing it to cell 7 again. And for the last column we have, which is the column 3, we're going to be comparing cell 2 with cell 5 and cell 8. So let me just write it down. Next, for the axes, what we're going to be doing is the axis 1 is going to start from 0, go to 4, and then get compared with the 8 to see if there's a match. The other axis, however, is going to be starting from the opposite side. So cell 2 gets compared with cell 4, 2, and lastly cell 2 will be again compared with cell 6. So these are basically all the win conditions with the correct indices implemented. So we're basically checking every single group of indices to see if there's a match. If there's a match, we know for certain that one of the players has won. We just don't know which one yet. Okay, so the next function that we're going to be working on is going to be this check draw function, which is arguable to be the simplest one here. What we're going to do is we're just going to check to see if turn count is less than 9. If it is less than 9, this is going to return false, meaning that the game has not run out of turns, and that it can go on. But if it is equal or greater than 9, I mean, it's never going to be able to greater than 9, but if it's equal to 9, it's going to return true, stating that the game needs to be over and ends in a draw. So to be able to use this function, we're just going to have a turn count variable here, which will be set to 0 by default and will be incremented later on inside of our loop. Okay, so the last and final function we're going to be needing in our project is going to be the switch turn function before we round up and put everything to order within our main function below. So what's going to happen here is that we're going to be taking in a pointer of the turn variable, which we should already have here, which by default will be set to x because the game starts with the x. So after a player plays their turn, what we're going to try to do is we're going to see if turn is equal to x. If it is equal to x, we will assign O here, and if it is equal to O, we're going to be assigning X to it. So let me just do it real quick. X. And then there we go. So this was the last of our functions that we needed to write before we round up everything and put them into order. So yeah, without further ado, let's continue. Okay guys, so a little apology for interrupting the video like this, but I just gotta make a little correction here. So when I was first writing this switch turn function, what I forgot to do was add these asterisks. So at this point in the video, it should be like this, but just please make sure to write them like this. I did fix them later on in the video, but just a heads up. Okay, so let's start our main function with something nice, something like a prompt to the user that says welcome to Tic Tac Toe, exclamation marks there. And below this, we want to have an infinite while loop here, and then inside of this, so basically every loop of this while function is gonna be another 10. So and at the beginning of each 10, we want to display our board here. So I'm just gonna say board display board here. Anyway, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna be actually. Okay, so I seem to have forgotten something. Enter cell index, it says here, but it doesn't say whose turn is it. So I'm just gonna say turn here, and then I'm just gonna say C here. Okay, so this should now print out whose turn is it. It is, but anyway, let's continue. So below this, we're just gonna have the insert function. It's gonna take in the turn variable and our board. So after this one, what we want to do is we want to increment the turn count. Yeah. And after this, the first thing that we want to do is to see if either player has won. So we're just gonna call the check win function. If one of the win conditions is met, what's gonna happen is that it's gonna be returning the true Boolean value. So basically we're gonna be going into the body of the if statement. So and inside of this if statement, we're simply just gonna say printf player slash %c has won. So I'm just gonna say turn, or return this, and then we're simply just gonna exit the program in the event of a win. But let's say that if none of the win conditions are met, what we're gonna check is we're gonna be checking for a draw. So we're just gonna check for a draw. We're gonna send in the turn count, and then we're just gonna be printing a prompt that says that the game ended in a draw. So we're just gonna say draw here, and then we're simply gonna exit the program. And then lastly, if neither of these conditions are met, if it's not a win, if it's not a draw, what's gonna happen is that the turn will simply switch to the other player. So we're just gonna say switch turn, address of 10. Since we need to send in a pointer, I'm just gonna get rid of this exit here because it's okay. So now that we have rounded everything up here, let's just try to play our game, shall we? So let's say that okay, so I probably shouldn't have forgotten to print out a new line after this one, but let's continue. So let's say that I want to populate cell number 1 and what? Player X has 1, but it doesn't switch to 10. Oh, I see. So we forgot the asterisks here. a little business mistake on my behalf. So now let me just try again. Actually, you know what? Let me just do this real quick. There we go, much better. So let's say that I want to play in the cell number 1. Let's now populate the cell number 3. Let's say that I want to populate the let's see, cell number 8. Okay, so we don't want X to win diagonally, so let's just populate cell 5. Then again, now what could we do as an X? I guess we could try to go for I guess we could populate cell number 7, which would put O in a situation where basically the player O would need to populate one of these 2 cells to prevent the win conditions. But you see, the thing is, if we populate this cell, X can populate this cell and then win based on the row 3 win condition here. But if we populate this cell, what's going to happen is that the player X is basically going to win using this win condition. So let's just say we want to populate cell 9. And then, yeah, the X will simply just populate cell 4. And then, yeah, player X will be winning this. So now let's just check if we can cause the game to end in a draw. So let's say that I want to populate cell number 1, and then 2, and then 3, 4, 5, 6. Now let's actually no, wait, so which one would we want to populate? So I think I'm just going to populate the number 8, but wait, there's no way we're going to be able to enter a draw like this, because you see the only last cell is this one. Player X has 1, populating this cell, but actually we should probably be printing out the table after this one as well. But aside from that, the game seems to be my bad. The game seems to be fully functional. So yeah. So this is it for today's video. I hope that you guys found it, you know, entertaining, helpful, educational by any means. If you did, please make sure to like and subscribe, and thank you for your time. See you guys in the next one. Have a good time.